lot of people say, I'm not really feeling that. I'm feeling this way. It seems to work for me. And so I choose to believe this about God instead. Out in our community today, and it's creeping in here, there are those who see no conflict with saying, well, there's this God who's created the world, and yet he has no problem with the mass murder that happens in this nation through the sin of abortion. That there's this Savior, Jesus, who takes the time to call his church his bride, but he's okay with the disintegration of marriage. That there's this Jesus who says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except by me. And yet in reality, he says there's many gods who are just as mighty to save as he. You see, all the while, God is crying out to us today saying, no, that's not who I am. Let me show you who I am. Here is my word. Enter into it. Be transformed by it through the renewing of your mind, and then your feelings will change. You can be a new creation, and you can embrace the real truth. And there's no celebrity, no amount of money or material things, and no politician that can promise us change like that to believe in, that is so necessary for our lives. And so here's something we all need to know. God isn't just talking about transformation and about people needing to know who he is if they're out there today. That's who we take the message to. But to do that, first we need to recognize he's talking to us too, because it's not just the people out there who are driven by their feelings. It happens among all of us. We make decisions based on our fleeting, changing feelings in our homes and in our schools and our workplaces, and sometimes we don't even know why the pastor keeps talking about why there's something wrong with that. But God calls us, just as he called these Israelite people, to love him with our whole heart and mind and soul, to love him with everything we've got, and an honest look at our lives reveals that sometimes we just don't feel like it. And then we try to transform him instead of being transformed by him. Take a look again up on the screens behind me. Those words that we've heard about loving the Lord our God. That these are to be on our hearts. They are to be with us every single place we go. You know what God is really saying there, if I might translate it for you? Think about me all the time. Talk about me all the time. Share me with everyone. I'm not an hour-a-week God. Don't feel like you've pleased me just because you are coming here for this hour on Sunday. Because you're mine. And I want every part of you. I deserve you. I think what happens, though, is that sometimes we live this struggle of misunderstanding what it means to live in the grace of God. It's this weird thing. You come here today, and what's one of the first things we do? We talk about how forgiven you are, how no matter how much is screwed up, that Jesus died for you, and that he loves you. And as frustrating as we can be at times, we have a God who accepts us because of what Jesus has done. Now, what happens from there sometimes that people get confused is that we misapply what that's supposed to make our lives look like. You see, some people say, well, I feel like doing this, and Jesus is going to forgive me anyway, so, I'm going to go ahead and do that. But in reality, when we are motivated by grace that Jesus has for us, we start to think in terms of, well, how can I love him? And how can I love others like I've first been loved? Even if right now I'm not quite feeling it. Wouldn't that be the way to change marriages? And to end abuse? And to bring a stop to the divisions of this world? A professor I had at the seminary tells of the time that he and another professor were given permission by their wives to drive to Chicago and attend an invitation-only bourbon and cigar party. Now, there are probably many, many reasons they shouldn't have been able to go, but that's beside their point. Their loving wives let them go. Now, what was interesting about the story is that the professor said at the end of the night, he was approached by this young, attractive hostess for the event, and it was her job to be nice to everybody there, but he perceived her to be flirting with him, and he admits now that his middle-aged ego was in need of a bit of a boost, and so his first reaction was to allow it and to play along. His gut feeling said, "Oh, what can it do? What can it hurt?" Thankfully, he had his friend, a Christian friend, a brother, who knew the God that was bigger than that feeling. And he grabbed him by the arm and he said, "You can't do that. You know better. And you're trampling all over grace." Think about that. You know better. And you're trampling all over grace. What he was saying was this. They knew the difference between what would build a relationship up and what would tear it down. That had been revealed to them by God in his word. And feelings should never trump that. Remember that. The next time you try to rationalize some behavior with the thought, doesn't God want me to be happy? The answer is no, not if it gets in the way of loving him with all of your heart and all of your mind and all of your soul. But even more, they knew that they were given these undeserved blessings by their wife. They could go and spend this money on a trip and be away from the kids and enjoy this hobby that wasn't necessarily a necessity in their life. And to do anything that would disrespect them would be completely trampling all over what they had received. Now, it's kind of easy to see that.